All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we're going to talk about the post-holiday blues. And the reason why I wanted to kind of highlight this today, as we of course are getting into the final stretch of our holiday celebrations or traditions, I think it's important to know what's potentially coming, right? So during the holidays, we are always kind of hustling and bustling, or maybe we're experiencing maybe some loss or some grief, some heavy emotions. And so there is a potential for us at the end of this season to kind of have an emotional dip or crash. And it's not uncommon, but it is often overlooked. So I want to take some time today, just kind of prepare you for that so that all the work we've been doing this year on nervous system literacy and management doesn't all just fall to the wayside when the holidays end, okay? But before I get into the content today, I want to invite you, if you're interested, we do have a post survey that we send out to participants. And this is just an opportunity for you to give me your opinion on this training as well as future trainings. If you have any suggestions, I do take that very seriously. So if you would like to fill out that survey, just put your email address in the chat and I will send it to you at the end of our time today. All right. Also, all of my trainings are recorded and they're put on our YouTube channel and our website. So if you want to go back and rewatch it, it should be available to you later on this week or early next week, depending on when my director posts it. But also, if you have any comments or if you want to have any questions, please just put that in the chat or wait till the end. Otherwise, if you unmute and start talking, your face and your name are going to be on the recording, and most people don't like that. So I just want to give you a heads up before we get going, okay? All right. So, what are the holiday blues? Okay, so the National Alliance on Mental Illness defines the holiday blues as a temporary feeling of anxiety or depression during or after the holiday season. And this can be associated with extra stress, unrealistic expectations, or even memories that accompany the season. Some people absolutely love this time of year, and some people absolutely avoid it at all costs because of the emotional weight and baggage that it can potentially carry. And so all of that kind of plays into the holiday blues or post-holiday blues, okay? So here's some statistics for you. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, approximately 24% of people with a diagnosed mental illness find the holidays make their condition a lot worse, and 40% say somewhat worse. And so the most difficult months for people who have seasonal affective disorder in the United States, it tends to be in January and February, according to the American Psychiatric Association. So if you have seasonal affective disorder, right, where the sun starts to kind of wane and your mood starts to kind of feel a little more down, this is going to probably exacerbate that, the post-holiday crash, okay? And so if you have if you already have like clinical depression or something like that, you're probably at a higher risk of experiencing this crash at the end of the holiday season, okay? But you don't have to have a diagnosis and you don't have to, suffer from seasonal affective disorder for the crash to happen. It can happen to anybody, but just kind of a heads up, if you already have something like that going on, you're probably at a higher risk of that crash after the Christmas and the New Year's season, okay? And so this can happen. It's a temporary emotional downturn after prolonged celebration or stress. Okay, so you can even have a really good holiday season and still experience this crash. Okay, it doesn't have to be tied up in bad memories, good memories, a loss or not a loss. It can happen to anybody at anywhere on the spectrum that you are. Okay. But it is temporary and it is common and it's normal and it's usually very short-lived, okay? But it's often more noticeable for people who are caregiving because you're carrying not only a higher emotional load, but also a logistic load, right? So you're, doing more planning, you're doing more strategizing, you're doing more on the financial end of things than you are the rest of the year. So all those stresses just kind of pile up on top of each other, right? But this isn't me trying to diagnose anybody, okay? Obviously, this is just to make you aware that there's a natural response, maybe even like a natural kind of exhale at the end of long stretches of intensity, okay? So why are you all especially vulnerable to this, okay? A lot of it is just what you do every day throughout the year, but kind of on steroids, right? It's like this crunch time, all these, other little details, all these things that most people don't notice because you're the one that's, organizing all the holiday cheer. It's on top of your already full plate that you're already having, right? And especially if you have children in the mix, that's adds a whole nother level of stress and time management and stress management and all that stuff, right? So increased responsibilities and expectations. I have found in my work with caregivers over the years that increased responsibilities are kind of par for the course. You can usually navigate that pretty well. A lot of you are very good at multitasking and things like that. But I think where a lot of us kind of get stuck in the mud is that increased expectation, right? What we think our holidays should look like, what we think we should be feeling or doing during these holidays. And we're almost kind of bracing for the ultimate disappointment, right? We're always kind of afraid that all of our efforts are going to kind of not be good enough. And I think this is a year-long thing that we struggle with, but especially in the holidays because we're so tired, we're so depleted already. A lot of us are not taking very good care of ourselves because, sugar abounds. And so we're just kind of eating cookies and all that fun stuff, and that can lower our mood and our energy. And so I think the expectations that we place on ourselves are often probably what makes us more vulnerable to this crash, right? Because we're already kind of at a high intensity anyway, okay? Emotional labor and managing family needs, right? Again, I have children and I know that this time of year can be really, really tough financially, but also all the additional activities that we're supposed to be, or expected to participate in, right? All the fun days at school that they're supposed to be having, all the, all the little gifts for teachers and all these little things that we're supposed to be doing because it's just culturally expected. There's a lot of emotional labor that goes into that, especially if you're not participating, right? I did that years ago. I'm not participating in all this extra stuff because I can't afford it financially or time management wise, right? And so then there's that managing all that on top of everything else can be what makes us more vulnerable, right? And another one, disrupted routines and reduced downtime, right? Routines are crucial when you are caregiving, especially if you're caregiving with somebody who has high needs, high emotional needs. Maybe they have high sensitivity. And so transitions are really difficult anyway. But if you disrupt routines on top of that, it's going to be even more of a sticky situation, right? Next, sleep changes, right? Sugar, alcohol, and social overstimulation. This can be a lot for anybody, but especially for people who are already kind of, their patience is a little thin, or maybe you're already kind of exhausted, right? And then, you're not getting the sleep that you need, and you're maybe kind of partying, or maybe not partying, but you're in social situations more. Maybe there's office parties, family gatherings, things like that. And I'm not saying don't indulge in sugar and alcohol and things like that, but this could be a reason why we experience that crash, right? Nutritionally, we're out of balance. Sleep-wise, we're out of balance. And so just our bodies are kind of having to adjust, right, to a depletion or a lack of routine in what you normally do, right? And then the internal pressure to make holidays magical, right? We always do our best and then always assume it's not good enough. And that again can lead to that crash right after Christmas. And we think, wow, we didn't, we didn't achieve that Norman Rockwell painting that we hoped we would. And now the season's gone and I feel like I haven't done enough, right? And that all of that stuff could just be you harping on yourself. Maybe nobody's even putting this pressure on you. You're doing it to yourself, right? And so being aware that that is potentially on the horizon, maybe take this as permission to just go ahead and give yourself that grace, right? Practice that self-compassion. It doesn't have to be all of the glitz and the glamour for it to be special and for it to be worth doing and making those memories, right? So a lot of caregivers discover that while others were celebrating, you're curating that experience, right? Everyone is enjoying the holiday magic and you're the one performing all of it. And so you don't really get a time to take in any of that and enjoy any of that, right? There's a cost to being the host that does all those things, right? There's a cost to being the one that does all the Christmas shopping and all the wrapping and all that, right? And so that can be very, very stressful and very, very draining. So the physiological drop. So there is actually, this is an internal bodily response. Okay. Sometimes people think, well, I just need to snap out of it. I'm just in a low mood. But there's a reason why you're in that space. And a lot of it is about your biology, right? So our nervous system recalibrates after sustained stress or excitement. Okay, so our cortisol levels shift. So cortisol is that fun little brain chemical that comes in when we're nervous, when we're stressed, when we're anxious, right? It's a stress hormone, and so that can become more intense, or it can deplete at the end of the holiday season, right? As the novelty ends, your dopamine decreases, right? So that's that chemical that tells us to go, to fix, to do, right? It's that gas pedal in our brain. And then as the novelty ends, we kind of hit that wall, right? It's kind of a quick break of that dopamine production, okay? Again, sleep cycles need resetting, especially if you've got little ones who are on Christmas break and they, are not going to bed like they used to, and they're staying up really late, or, and that's all fine and well. But again, this is just to kind of prepare you. This is paving the way of why we have these crashes at the end of the season. Okay. The energy that you have, maybe from that dopamine spiking, it'll drop, right? When your body returns to that baseline. So after all the partying and all the celebrating is done, your body returns to that baseline and it can feel like your energy drops. And then the emotional tone will just naturally soften or sink. Okay, so maybe you were up at a really high, jovial, celebratory space, and then everybody goes home and the lights are turned off, and now you are going back to baseline, but it feels like a complete drop, even though you're not going under your baseline. You could, but just going from such a high space down to your normal can feel like a plunge almost, right? So think of it as like an emotional tide. So during the holidays, it's flooding in, and in January it kind of ebbs out. Okay. So it can go back to normal, but then it can also go a little bit lower than normal too. And that's all normal. Okay. So some common experiences after the holidays: low energy or decreased motivation, right? The razzle dazzle has faded. And so now we don't really want to do anything. I don't know about you all, but taking down the Christmas tree always seems to be like kind of a sad moment in my home, right? Increased irritability. And that could be, again, your mood's going from way up down to baseline or lower. And that can cause irritability. You could be experiencing a nutritional crash. Maybe you haven't been taking very good care of yourself over the last couple months because you've been indulging and not sleeping and not drinking your water and all that stuff. Feeling flat, right? Where you just kind of don't have, an up or a down. You're just kind of meh. Or even sad or nostalgic, right? Even if the holiday season brings you good things, there could still be a lot of things in that could cause you to feel sad, right? Maybe you've had some losses this year, or maybe it's just been a very stressful year, or maybe you are forced to engage with family members that maybe aren't so kind to you, and so there's always kind of that sadness that can kind of come after that. Let's see, overstimulation hangover, right? We're having a lot of fun, we're having a good time, but hey, our nervous system hasn't really reset itself. It hasn't really had that time to take that deep breath. And so here we are, feeling overstimulated and kind of, in the weeds a little bit because of that. Maybe you're feeling some loneliness if you had some family and friends come into your space and then they're gone, right? Maybe they're out of town, or maybe they don't really get together during the year. And so this was, that one time that you all got to get together and you had a good time, and now they're gone, and the emptiness can make you feel a lot more lonely than maybe you would have normally. Guilt for not feeling cheerful. Again, it's that expectation we place on ourselves, right? Maybe you're tired, maybe you're sad, maybe you're grieving, maybe you're stressed out, right? And then people notice, and then you feel guilty that people noticed, right? But you're allowed to be a human being. You're allowed to have these moments where you don't feel like entertaining or, being jovial, right? You don't need to feel guilty for that. And then maybe there's just that hollow letdown, right? Again, where everything just kind of ends and then you're just kind of left with that emptiness, right? That echo of how, it's back to normal, back into your routine, and it doesn't have that, bright and cheery feeling that you just experienced for, a month or longer, right? And so this is a spectrum. It's very, very wide, and it's very, very normal to find yourself somewhere on that spectrum, okay? And we'll go into some warning signs later on about when you maybe need to reach out for additional support. So some stressors that may be unique to you as a caregiver, okay? So care needs often increase with holiday disruptions, okay? So this can be regardless of your loved one's diagnosis, but especially if you have maybe people who are neurodivergent and they have more sensitivity to things, more sensory overload. If you're taking care of a person who has like dementia or some form of cognitive decline, their brain may be really struggling to keep up with all the extra activity and all the extra stimulation, right? And so their care needs are going to increase. They're going to need more regulation. They're going to need more compassion. They're going to need more signals of safety and security, right? And guess what? That falls on your shoulders, right? And that can be very, very stressful. More coordination, more decisions, and fewer breaks. So you're already in this space during the year where you're having to do all these things. And then we add the holidays on top of it, and it just makes it more intense, right? That load gets a little more heavy at this time of year. So you get more stressed, right? And then emotional management of family dynamics, right? Oftentimes, caregivers are the person in the family who just naturally was the regulator, right? Whether you became, or, before you became a caregiver officially, you probably were in some capacity, the one to kind of settle everything or be helpful, right? These expectations people have. And then you get your family together and those dynamics are just right there in your face again, right? Or maybe you've got people who aren't even around you except for on the holidays, but then they come in and they've got all their opinions about what you should be doing and how you're not doing your job, right? And then you have to manage that, right? And that can be very, very stressful. Having lack of true rest and personal time, right? Which you will already struggle with, but then you add all these other events and expectations on top of it, and you're going to be really stretched thin, right? And then the pressure to appear steady and calm, right? Especially if you're trying to make sure your loved one is regulated, you have to stay regulated, or at least, pretend that you're regulated. And that's very stressful, right? So it's not uncommon for caregivers to play that unseen backstage crew kind of role, right, during the holiday season. And so all of your, unnoticed labor is even more so, right, because you're doing all the things, you're making all the magic, or even just trying to keep your loved one regulated and since their routines are disrupted. A lot of that goes unnoticed, right? And so it can be very stressful. All right, so when it's more than just the blues, this is all very normal. Like I said before, you don't have to have a mental health diagnosis to experience kind of a drop at the end of the season. But some of us experience a drop and it's not as temporary as we'd like it to be, or maybe it makes it to where it's harder for you to manage and get back into your routine. Okay. So these are just some things to look out for just in case. Okay. So if you are in a low mood and that is lasting longer than 2 to 3 weeks, okay, where you just cannot shake out of this funk that you're in, okay, consider extra support. And so that could be reaching out to a professional, that could be reaching out to a friend or family member. Doesn't have to be extreme. It could just be like, hey, I'm not feeling great. I haven't been feeling great for a while and I need some support, okay? If you were having a loss of interest in your usual activities, right? There's some things that you enjoy doing, and now all of a sudden you just don't really feel like it's going to be worth doing it, right? You don't have interest in it. You don't feel the joy that you used to feel, okay? And again, this is all something that lasts longer than 2 or 3 weeks, okay? Significant sleep or appetite changes. Now, we just talked about sleep and appetite changes bringing more stress into your space. But after the holidays, after, a week or so, if you're still feeling like you're not sleeping like you normally do, right? And that could be not getting enough sleep or getting too much sleep, okay? Or maybe you have a loss of appetite, or maybe you're still kind of eating to like fill in that stress, right? Some of us, we cope through appetite changes and sleep changes. But if it lasts longer than 2 or 3 weeks, reach out for some extra support, okay? If you find yourself withdrawing from connection, and now I'm not talking about just resetting and recuperating from overstimulation and over socializing, okay? I'm an introvert, so when I socialize, you need to give me a good 3 to 5 day window to not talk to nobody because I can recoup, right? That's not abnormal. But what is abnormal is when you are withdrawing from connection for an extended period of time, okay? That could be a sign of depression, or that it's more than just that crash or those blues that we experience, okay? And then finally, the most important one, at least from a former suicide prevention educator's perspective, that feelings of hopelessness or that overwhelm, again, that lasts for longer than 2 to 3 weeks. What this is where you're thinking, you've convinced yourself that nothing is going to change, nothing's going to get better, you're always going to feel bad, you're always going to feel overwhelmed. There's no hope for you on the horizon, okay? That's a huge red flag that you need to talk to somebody. And again, it could be a mental health professional. It could be a friend or family member that you can trust. Or you can even just reach out to me, right? And call me, and I'll help you through that, okay? But these are just things not to scare you, but just to be mindful of, okay? We all experience, well, I shouldn't say all of this, but we're all susceptible to that post-holiday crash. But if it feels like it's not getting any better and it's been a couple weeks, it may be more than that, okay? So I'm not trying to label anyone. This is just providing those clear thresholds, right? So we know when to seek additional care. So what helps us reset after the crash, okay? Or maybe even help prevent the crash if we start to feel it kind of creeping up on us, okay? So resetting the body, okay? This is one of the easiest ways, I think, or that I have found, to really gauge where I am mentally, okay? Am I fed? Am I hydrated? Am I rested? Okay, and if I have all three of those things and I'm still feeling kind of mucky, then maybe there needs to be some more supports, okay? So we want to make sure that we're hydrating, okay? We want to make sure that we're moving, and that doesn't mean, go out in 17-degree weather and run 5 miles, okay? If that's your thing, that's your thing. But I'm just talking about, walking, gentle stretching, maybe dancing, right? Just kind of get your body going, because you can get kind of sluggish in these holiday seasons, and movement is good for the brain, okay? And it's good for your mood. And then reestablish consistent sleep rhythms, okay? So, kids are back in school, the routine's back on, you're back at work, or, there's no late night parties, late night movies, things like that. So just try to reestablish those consistent sleep times and then see how you feel. Next, reset the mind, okay? So we can take little breaks, 2 to 5 minutes throughout the day, and just, breathe, do a little body check-in. How am I feeling? Where am I holding stress? Are my jaws tight? Are my shoulders tense, right? Just doing those little things, and then recalibrating throughout the day can be very, very helpful. And then reducing noise and stimulation if possible. I love to just be kind of in my solitude for a while and do that little mental reset, light an incense or a candle, or play some music I really enjoy that's soothing. Just those little things can be very, very helpful to help reset. And then give yourself permission for not today, right? If you're depleted, if you're tired, and there's some things that you can put off for a little bit, it's not going to hurt anybody. Just take advantage of that, right? Give yourself that downtime so that you can reset your mind and get back into your regular routine, okay? And then finally, reset your expectations, okay? Sometimes we get it in our head that, as soon as January 1st hits, we're going to be a totally different person, right? All of the things that we wanted to work on, all of our perceived flaws, we're just going to not be that way anymore, right? That's not a realistic expectation. And most of the time, it's not even necessary. We don't need to do a complete overhaul of our personality and our habits, right, within a 24-hour period just because New Year's hit, right? We don't have to do that. So January isn't about perfection, okay? Maybe find one area of your life that you can simplify, right? Even if it's just temporarily while you reorganize or reset for the year, right? And then let the home recover gradually. Okay. Some people love to just kind of pack it all up and put it away the day after Christmas, and that's totally fine too. But you don't have to just have this abrupt stop, right? You can kind of let it recover gradually. Okay. So you can't expect all this, fun and festivities to happen and then turn around and you're right back to your routine, especially if you have kids or your loved one has a harder time getting back to routine. Let it take the time it needs to take, okay, within reason. So just small doable adjustments helps your nervous system to readjust and return to steadiness, okay? We want to be gentle with ourselves. So emotional rebalancing, okay? Please, 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 if you can, throughout the entire year, not just this time of year, practice self-kindness instead of self-critique, okay? This is something that you have to practice doing because most of us, for the majority of our lives, have been more critical than kind to ourselves. And so it is a very difficult habit to break. Sometimes we will criticize ourselves internally just on impulse and we won't even have a reason for it. We're just mean to ourselves, right? So practicing self-kindness has to be intentional because we are not naturally wired for that typically, right? And so, what do I mean by practicing self kindness? Well, if you find yourself in a situation where you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, I should have done this, I shouldn't have thought that, right? Where we're just kind of like heaping that criticism, just stop and be like, anybody in my situation would probably feel this way. It's normal for me to be tired. It's normal for me to be, wanting to be by myself for a little while, right? And that way, you're normalizing being a human being, right? And you're not guilting yourself for feeling the way you feel, okay? And that can go a long way in preventing those deeper like journeys into the post-holiday blues, okay? Next, recognize that exhaustion is not a personal flaw. Okay. We are not the Energizer Bunny. I wish we could, run and run and run and go and go and go. But that's not the reality most of us live in, right? We get tired, mentally tired, emotionally tired, physically tired. That's not a personal flaw. That is a species level thing, right? All human beings get tired. All human beings get exhausted. You're not the exception to that rule. Okay. So don't feel bad if you need to take a couple days to recover. Even if you had a really good holiday season, right? You still need to kind of have that time to reset. Okay. So you can create small grounding rituals as well. I've talked about this a lot this year. Just very small things that you can do every day. A short breathing practice, right? Enjoying a warm drink, enjoying a longer shower, right? A minute outdoors if you can stand the cold. Not me, but some of y'all can. These are just little additions back into your self-care cup, right? Especially if you've been pouring yourself out for the last month or two. It's, even if you're not the one planning everything, even if you're just someone who's invited and you show up, you might still have some things that you're struggling with, right? Maybe again, like shift in the way traditions normally go. Maybe your loved one's care needs have increased over the years. So Christmas or the holiday season just feels a little differently, right? There could be some grief tied to the celebrations, right? And that's all okay, all right? But we just want to make sure that we are being mindful of how we care for ourselves and give ourselves that self-compassion when we need our break, okay? And sometimes the break is just, hey, no, I'm not going to come to Christmas this morning, or I'm not going to come to the holiday dinner, not because I don't love you, but I'm just, I'm in a sad place right now and I just want to be in that place. And that's okay too, right? And so one thing that you can ask yourself is what would make my day 2% easier, right? We're not talking about a huge overhaul, just what would make today a little bit easier, okay? It doesn't have to be big. It could just be anything, right? So micro adjustments matter more than grand reinventions, okay? We don't have to reinvent the wheel to feel good and to feel normal, okay? Connection without overextension, Okay. So some people are very, very energized by interactions and connections, and some people are very, very depleted. And both are normal, both are okay. Okay. It's just the way you're wired. But sometimes we can feel, even the most an extroverted person can feel depleted socially after the holiday season, right? So it's important to have at least one person that's supportive, that doesn't require a lot of energy from you. You know, that person who, when you spend time with them, you feel more nourished and energized than other people, right? Reach out to that person if you're feeling down, right? Or if you're feeling the need to isolate and it's not in a healthy way, you know, not in a recovery way, but more of like, you know, a sad or depressed way, make sure you have that one person that you can reach out to. Okay. And again, if you don't have a person in your life that you can reach out to, you can always schedule a care chat with me and I can make myself available for you. Okay. Another thing that you can do, schedule a protected no commitment window. Okay. So that could be just an hour or two out of your day or an hour or two out of your week where you don't have any commitments, you don't have any obligations, right? You just get to be, you just get to exist for that time. Okay. Too often I find caregivers, they get respite, so someone can take care of their loved one for them, and then they go and they do a month's worth of tasks within like a 2 hour period, right? That's not really resting, okay? And I understand that's necessary, and that's what respite is for, and we need to do those things. But you can also give yourself just a little bit of time every week where you don't have to be committed, you don't have to be task oriented, okay? Speaking of tasks, there's probably a lot that you could delegate to somebody else, even if it's just a small one, right? Maybe you can just ask somebody to, you know, put the Christmas decorations in the attic for you, right? Or maybe just say, hey, can you cover dinner today, right? It doesn't have to be a huge commitment. It can just be one task that somebody else does, except for that's not you, right? And then next, say yes more slowly during this season. So what does that mean? Sometimes we impulsively agree to do something that we really don't have the time, the energy, the resources for. But we are just so caught in that habit of saying yes and being helpful and being the one to do something for somebody else that we say yes too quickly. And then when it's time to deliver, we're like, ugh, I wish I would have just said no, or I wish I would have thought about that a little bit before I took on this task, right? Our need to be helpful sometimes supersedes our understanding of how much time we actually have or how many, you know, how much emotional resources we actually have, right? So just be more mindful to the kinds of commitments you make to other people during this year, during the season, and that'll help with all the other things, right? All those additional stressors that we have. If we can just say no more often, say yes more slowly, we open up a lot more space for rest and recalibration during these more stressful times, okay? But the main thing I want you to remember is that when we do connect with somebody, when we do find those social interactions, they should not drain you. They should feel nourishing to you, okay? Now, I say that fully understanding that, you know, we all have somebody in our space during these seasons that are not nourishing, that are draining, but hey, we all have to hang out with Aunt so and so, right? Some things are unavoidable, but it's okay to avoid people that drain you, okay, and to find people who nourish you, and that's whether it's a holiday season or not. Okay, that's just, I think, good advice all the way around. So, building a gentle reentry plan. Okay, so after the holidays, for the next 1 or 2 weeks, ease back into your routine one piece at a time. Okay, plan one simple pleasure activity. Okay, so that could be, you know, watching a movie, or it could be cooking a meal that you enjoy, or it could just be maybe taking a walk in your neighborhood, you know, just to get some fresh air. Doesn't have to be huge, just something that brings you a little bit of pleasure. Delay major decisions. Okay, sometimes we get in these blue moods and we make snap decisions on things that have a lasting impact, right? Major decisions where it's just like, I'm so stressed, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm going to move to Kentucky, right? We don't need to do all that. But so there is a major decision and you aren't feeling quite yourself. Just see if you can postpone it so you can give it some more thought until you've recalibrated, till you've regulated, then you can be out of stress mode and into, your logical thinking mode. And you could probably make better decisions in that space. You can do light meal planning to reduce that daily mental load, right? I don't know about you guys, but it seems like maybe a week after Christmas, my family we're eating, grilled cheese sandwiches and, easy casseroles and things like that because I'm depleted and I need to recoup, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. If you're giving your family time to recuperate, you can give yourself that time as well. Okay. And when I say meal planning, I'm not talking about, those gym bro influencers who spend 6 hours every Sunday, making the meals for the whole week. Just, pick up some things that are easy. Okay. That don't require a lot of planning, don't require a lot of mental effort. Okay. Choose one small reset zone in the house. So it doesn't have to be the whole home. Okay. But just a small reset zone. So that could just be a place that is untouched and kind of quiet for you to go and reset, right? If you're feeling that overwhelmed, if you're still feeling depleted and you need somewhere to go to just kind of recollect yourself, it's okay to have those sacred spaces, okay? So again, this is about pacing, not performance, okay? We don't want to get in a space where we are depleting ourselves because we want everybody else to experience this performance of the holidays, okay? Or this performance of getting back to normal, okay? Do it at your own pace. Also keeping in mind that if it lasts for, several weeks and you're still kind of down in the dumps, reach out to somebody. But again, not everything has to happen. You don't have to say, well, now it's January 2nd and I have to be completely back to normal. You don't. Okay. It takes time and that's okay. Just one more slide. So here's your permission slip. Okay. You carry a great deal through the holidays. Again, some of you are planning, some of you are participating, but as a caregiver, there's a lot that goes into the holidays and the routines being disrupted and, nostalgia and grief and all that stuff, right? And the logistics can still be hard, even if you're not creating the Christmas magic for everybody. But you're allowed to rest, okay? And if you do feel the blues, that does not mean you're failing, okay? That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means there's something normal with you, okay? Almost every human being is susceptible to this experience, okay? It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, all right? Your body and your heart recalibrating after brightness and noise, okay? That's what the blues is. It is your body getting back to normal and it can feel like a crash and it can feel like a low, okay? But again, that's your body being being a human, right? Doing what it's supposed to do. So you can soften. This is your permission. You can soften, you can slow down, and you can begin again gently, okay? You don't have to do these quick whiplash switches into something else, okay? So just be kind to yourself, be compassionate. Now that you know this is a thing that can happen and probably has happened in the past, you just maybe weren't that aware of it. Don't beat yourself up for it and make it worse, okay? Accept that it's normal, prepare for it. You may not need the preparation, but if you do need it, it's going to be good to have it, right? And just let yourself be a human being, okay? Don't beat yourself up for that. So this is a slump, maybe, right? It's a season, but it's temporary, okay? All right, and that's it. We got a little bit of time to chat, so I'll go ahead and stop my share and the recording.